twilight hours, voices sing tales of hope and heartbreak, everything a rhythmic blend of dreams.
So very welcome everyone to this online cafe. So each meeting will be hosted by a different member of one of the ISME committees and special interest groups. As you know today, the special interest group is the practice and research in integrated music education. So the main purpose of our meeting is to provide a platform for music education practitioners and students across the global to share, discuss, and reflect on their experiences and narratives while learning from and with one another in an atmosphere of safety, trust, and mutual support. So by participating in this meeting, we all agree to take this opportunity for the following. So we aim at creating a welcoming and inclusive environment. We accept and honor diverse perspectives. We cultivate a sense of belonging and trust. We cultivate open and honest communication. We foster the health and well-being of all participants. We listen, respond, and disagree respectfully and avoid judgmental statements towards others. So let's talk and get inspired. So today the topic is embodiment in music education, and we are very, very happy and honored to have Dr. Luc Nijs from the University of Luxembourg and Dr. Sabine Chatelain from the HEP Lausanne, Switzerland. So let's welcome them. So could our speaker unmute yourself because we cannot hear?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, hello, everybody. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
So,
Thank you.
welcome to our first SIG Prime Online Café. Our SIG Prime wants to integrate music as an indispensable permanent aspect of education, taking into consideration all facets of integrated education. Integrated music education can also be seen as reaching our inner thinking and social interaction from the core of the human need to express. In this perspective, we want to actually underline the significance of embodied experience through music. Embodied interaction with and through music can be understood as empowering, contributing to motivation, sense of belonging, sense of agency, and well-being. In order to deepen this topic, we are honored to welcome Professor Dr. Luc Nijs from the University of Luxembourg for this online cafe. He is the course director of the Bachelor in Music Education in the University of Luxembourg, and his teaching and research focuses on embedded practices, creativity, and the use of technology. As an internationally recognized researcher in the field of embodied music cognition, his special interest for education leads him to rethink musicianship and music teaching through the kinesiological approach and well-being in instrumental teaching. So welcome, Luc Nijs. We are very happy. We are in the same room in Luxembourg, and the floor is yours.
Just sharing my presentation. And let's see if it works. Is it okay for everyone?
Looks good. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Yes,
Good. So hello.
thank you.
Great. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, perhaps even good evening. First of all, I would like to thank Karina Marianne and Sabine Chatelain for the invitation to give this talk. It is my first time I present for such an ISME event, and I'm really honored and very glad to have been given this opportunity. So let me jump right in and start with some dazzling facts. First, research has made clear that many students enrolled in music education prematurely drop out for various reasons, including transition from adolescence to adulthood, socioeconomic factors, loss of motivation, loss of support, or logistic issues. And it is astonishing that, for example, Ruth and Mullensiefen found that up to 50% of the students drop out by the age of 15 to 17 years old. And other research confirms these high percentages, although not always that high, but okay, they confirm. Another fact, playing music, while often considered as an empowering activity, also leads to physical and mental health issues. In a literature review, Brage and colleagues found percentages of musicians suffering up to 93%. Importantly, while most of the research concerns professional musicians, also music students are prone to such issues. And then finally, another fact, according to the Children's World International Survey on Children's Subjective Well-Being, that's one of the largest multinational studies. It involved 128,000 children in 35 countries. And they noticed that children's subjective perceptions and evaluations of their lives and well-being across different contexts and domains. They see that subjective well-being decreases with age in most countries across different measures of well-being related to specific aspects of life, such as home, friendship, and school, starting around the age of 10 years old. Facts like this, in addition to new insights we gain from fields such as educational sciences, musicology, psychology, they always poke me and they make me wonder, should we perhaps rethink music education? And in my personal research agenda, I focus mostly on instrumental music education, but I believe this can be easily broadened, as I do, for example, with Melissa Bremmer. In that regard, I'd like to draw attention to a lecture Melissa and I are giving for the Possibility Studies Network next Thursday, where we will talk about embodied music pedagogy as a pedagogy of the possible. Rethinking music education and thinking about possible futures while taking into account the facts I spoke about, they urge to connect to insights about the power of music and consider to what extent we tap into this power as music educators, teachers, facilitators, and support our students in flourishing personally and musically. Now, there is a lot of literature on the power of music, showing or arguing that music fosters motor, cognitive, emotional, or affective and social skills. It contributes to the development of gross and fine motor abilities, to cognitive abilities such as memory, executive function, self-regulation, attention and cognitive flexibility, to emotional skills such as mood regulation, emotion recognition, or emotional intelligence, and finally, to pro-social behavior, positive relationships, bonding. In other words, music is a magic potion. Nevertheless, some nuances should be made. The work of Salah and Gobert, but also of Schellenberg, for example, urge us to be cautious when making strong claims about the power of music. And personally, I believe it provokes us to dig deeper and consider the very nature of music interaction. And so, yes, I think we should be audacious and continuously rethink music education, but always bear in mind some caveats, such as those about the claims about the power of music, but also about traditional approaches to music education. When thinking about new possibilities, we should not forget about the value, the richness, and the accomplishments of traditional approaches to music education. So rethinking music education, that is actually something I've, as Sabine has said, been doing along. And so perhaps now is a moment to say something about myself, because I believe that rethinking music education needs a synergy, to use a buzzword, between practice, theory, and empirical work. And I feel very privileged that I have the opportunity to combine my experience in performing and teaching music with my scholarly work, in which I focus a lot on connecting theory to practice prior to engaging in empirical work. I see teaching at different levels, whether in an early childhood setting or in a higher music institution, a university or a music school, as the fundament of my work. I always say, practice is where my heart as a musician beats. But let me continue the story now. In his book, Teaching Happiness and Well-Being in Schools, Learning to Ride Elephants, Ian Morris pleads for a reorientation of schools, moving away from an instrumentalist stance that focuses on increasing efficiency and productivity towards an eudaimonic stance that focuses on fostering well-being through engaging in those activities that go to make up a life well lived. As such, creating a school climate that promotes learning and well-being is valued as an important factor of healthy academic and personal development. The Children's World International Survey on Children's Subjective Well-being made it very clear how important school is, highlighting the impact of school and school-related variables on well-being. Inspired by the research on music and well-being, and by Morris's radical alternative idea that the ultimate purpose of education is human well-being or flourishing, and that everything we do in schools should be geared towards this aim, I propose to look at music school, and by extension all contexts that regard music learning, as a place that fosters well-being in and through musical development. It is important to immediately specify that I do not adopt an instrumentalist view, based on the idea that learning to play a music instrument serves the development of well-being. Rather, in my view, adopting a caring stance in instrumental music teaching is about creating a synergy between the development of musicianship and well-being, in which development in and through music are intimately connected. And in my view, to create this synergy means using the building blocks of well-being to design and shape the dynamics of music teaching and learning. In other words, I conceive musical and well-being development as the two chains of the DNA of music education, with the PERMA building blocks of well-being as the basis of the ladder that connects the two chains. And this means that when designing music activities, we do not only take musical goals into account, but we shape lessons with the building blocks of well-being in mind. And to see how we can do that, I would like to first introduce a model developed by Melissa Bremer and myself. And also in the past 3 weeks, we worked a lot on this with Sabine, who was visiting at the University of Luxembourg. But this model is actually a fundament of what we call an embodied music pedagogy. And this pedagogy acknowledges the fundamental role of learners and teachers' physical and expressive interaction with music and each other. And it is developed for lessons where communication through, with, in sound and music is the dominant mode. The embodied music pedagogy, as Melissa and I develop it, is based on several theoretical frameworks. The first is a theory of embodied interaction, according to which human interaction with music is fundamentally determined by bodily engagement with music. And here we focus on the basic mechanisms of musical sense-making, namely entrainment, prediction, and alignment. Second, we build on dynamical systems theory, conceiving a music lesson as a dynamical system that evolves over time and constitutes self-organized emergent learning. The components of this system are the teacher, the learners, and the learning content. Third, we use nonlinear pedagogy, more specific, the constraints-led approach, according to which the process of emergent learning can be shaped by manipulating 3 types of constraints: individual, task, and environmental constraints. And in recent times, I add my work on well-being and the DNA of music education to this model. As said, I use the PERMA model of well-being as a lens, a perspective when designing learning activities. And this leads to the following general framework or model, if you want. And in this framework, the permanent building blocks of well-being become a driver for the design and use of the different constraints that shape the process of emergent learning. And what you see here is how musical and well-being development emerge from the dynamics that between the teacher, the learner, and the learning content. So whenever we design, and I repeat this often, I think, it is important to think how the dynamic interaction within a music lesson can appeal to each of the 5 building blocks. Important to know is that within the embodied music pedagogy, we see the body and bodily engagement with music and with each other as the core of the whole process. And in the following slides, I will go deeper into these different theoretical frameworks and connect them to the idea of empowerment, because that is what this lecture is about. And I see that I have videos. I'm sorry for that. I hope we will have the sound actually. But the main idea of embodied music cognition is that our body is essential and fundamental to how we organize sound and extract meaning from it. According to Mark Lehmann, I think it's a must read for everybody interested in the fundamental role of the body. There are 3 mechanisms that support making sense of music and as such enable musical understanding, expressiveness, and creativity. According to Lehmann, making sense of music is based on the process of enactment, which involves the process of transforming sounds into movement, into intentionality. To make this concrete, think about a pattern in the music that sounds like ta-dum, 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 ta-dum. Unconsciously, we could connect it to a kind of hopping movement, and then this movement is experienced as something happy. So the process of enactment has 3 basic mechanisms: entrainment, prediction, and alignment. And the interplay of these mechanisms leads to a state of empowerment, which in the context of well-being is evidently important. Entrainment is a force that pulls us towards synchronization. And now let's hope that it works, but I have a video to look at this. It says more than words.
Excuse me, Luke. I don't believe we can hear the audio.
You cannot hear the audio? Okay. Then I will quickly go out and see if I can stop share again, and share my computer sound. I'm sorry for this. I hope it works now. Of course, you all know the video, I guess, about the metronomes. Is that enough? Incredible to see. So there is this force towards that pulls us towards that pulls the metronomes actually towards synchronization. And very often when I show this video, I talk about, well, we look most of the time we look at the metronomes, but there is something that is way more important than the metronomes, and that is, where are the metronomes standing on? It is exactly the condition that creates the possibility to entrain. And this is something to keep in mind. It's very important. And thinking about, for example, the constraints and how we shape a learning environment and learning activities is creating conditions so that something can happen. Let's go to prediction.
Talking
Prediction
about expectations.
Yes.
Expectations. Watch. Ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba. Okay.
I think we all know this video. It's a really famous one. And so here we can see some form of prediction. A prediction concerns the ability to anticipate what is coming next in the music. And again, we have the same as in the previous video. When we look at this video, many things are happening and we focus on, oh, wow, the public or the audience is actually managing to sing the following sound. But if you look at the behavior here of oh my God,
Bobby McFerrin.
Bobby McFerrin, sorry. He's doing many things actually. So when you look at the movement of his arms, he's actually helping us to predict. And this is something that Melissa Bremer works a lot on, is the power, let's say, of the movement that a teacher makes. Because he, here, Bobby McFerrin, is priming us by moving his left arm to the left. And in that way, he helps us to predict. So let's go to alignment. Alignment is about connecting movement to elements in the music. And I have another video, again, a famous one.
Ram, make your work a pleasure. Move with the rhythm of music. Our next selection, Brahms' Hungarian Dance, number 5.
I think you all got the point. What Charlie Chaplin is doing, he's aligning his movements to different elements in the music. He's doing that overtly, but it's also something that can happen covertly. But so to remind you, those three mechanisms are basic mechanisms for the project of enaction, which is actually the basis for musical sense making. But how is this all related to empowerment? For Mark Lehmann, empowerment comes from the expressive interaction or expressive alignment with music, inducing a state of pleasurable, energized equilibrium. He calls it a homeostasis that emerges when different interaction states, intentional, affective, energetic, motivational, reward-related, reinforce each other during expressive alignment with music. And this empowered state is not merely cognitive or emotional. Lehmann argues that empowerment results from a cognitive motivational loop. It's an internal cycle in which cognitive and motivational processes mutually enhance each other during expressive interaction with music. And this loop forms the fundament of musical empowerment. The cognitive component is about processing patterns, such as recognizing, remembering, finding a structure in it. And here, prediction plays a very important role. The motivational component is about valence and arousal. Valence is about how pleasurable something is. Arousal refers to a degree of activation. And this motivational aspect is very much related to why and how we select responses to musical affordances, being elements in the music environment that invite us to do something with it. And the driving force behind all this is the human innate inclination to be expressive. Now, Lehmann explains empowerment by describing three transition processes that occur when a person aligns movement with musical patterns. And these processes operate in parallel and jointly fuel the cognitive motivational loop. And now I have to click yes. In the next slide, I will just touch upon these transition processes, and it would take us far too long, but I invite you to dig deeper into that when it interests you. A first transition process concerns the successful prediction while aligning music and movement. And this leads to a heightened sense of control and perceived agency, which induces positive emotions and deep satisfaction with what one is doing. And as such, it motivates to continue. And that motivation reinforces the process of alignment and prediction. So the keyword for empowerment here is agency. A second transition process concerns the physical involvement and effort during alignment and how that directs attention through heightened arousal. And this might lead to a flow state and as such increase intrinsic motivation to keep on investing in the alignment. And according to Leman, the keyword here is arousal. A third transition process concerns the expressive interaction with music, often leading to pro-social and effective involvement with others, inducing feelings of togetherness, empathy, and social bonding. And now, if we go back to the beginning of this talk, where I talked about the power of music and how we should be nuanced about it, there is one thing that really comes up all the time, and the power of music is very clear when it comes to those social aspects. Here, I have to say that we have to think about expression. I told you it's an innate inclination to be expressive that we as humans have. You can go to Darwin to see that in his writings. But it's important to know that there is a biological aspect and there is also a cultural aspect. So let's not forget that. It's not because we say that's innate that we don't have the cultural aspect as a part of it. So here, what is very important is the fact that we feel that we can be expressive in the alignment with music. So agency, arousal, expressiveness are key elements that empower us while interacting with music. Let's go to the next theory, dynamical system theory. Dynamical systems are systems where the whole is always more than the sum of its parts, based on the dynamic interaction between its components and between components and the whole. Think of music performance, which forms a complex dynamical system with its different components, such as the musician, the instrument, the audience, and the sounding music. Each individual component, but also the interaction between the components, determines the performance as a whole. For instance, the audience and the musicians form a coupled system. So when the audience reacts enthusiastically, this will influence the way the musicians play, probably perhaps more vigorously. But in the same way, we can conceive of an instrumental music lesson as a dynamical system, because a lesson always involves the dynamic interaction between the teacher, the student, and the lesson content. And although we conceive of the teacher as part of the system during the actual pedagogical interaction, the teacher has the possibility to shape the interaction through the lesson design, including, for example, the pedagogical goals and the choice of materials to achieve that goal. And this brings us to nonlinear pedagogy and the constraints-led approach. Nonlinear pedagogy is developed in physical education. It acknowledges the complexity of learning by considering the interplay between learners, their environment, and teachers as a dynamic system. And to do so, it embraces the constraints-led approach, according to which the process of emergent learning can be shaped by using three types of constraints: individual, task, and environmental constraints. The individual constraints, we could also say conditions of possibility, concern what an individual can do or is invited to do. They can be structural and thus constant, involving, for example, the size of a hand, which influences the way we can play chords on the piano, just as an example. Or they can be functional and thus changing over time, or influenced or being influenced by a teacher or another student, such as motivation, fatigue, concentration. The task constraints concern the goals and conditions of the task. The environmental constraints concerns the elements in the environment, such as the teacher, other learners, and learning materials. And here it is of interest to look at the relation between constraints on the one hand and affordances on the other. Affordances can be seen as the possibilities for action provided by the environment, and they might be perceived by the student. Constraints can help to highlight certain relevant affordances and so create specific action possibilities within a musical activity. And through a constraints-led approach, learning can emerge from the learner's goal-oriented, adaptive interactions in the learning environment. I will come back to the constraints when I discuss an example of practice based on this theoretical framework. Okay, good. So how does this relate to empowerment? When conceiving of a musical lesson as a dynamical system, it brings about certain characteristics to our lessons. For example, learners are seen as active agents. We give them a voice. They can make choices. They can self-direct the learning. And this leads to ownership and self-regulation. But small changes also matter. So there is little encouragement, being supportive, giving positive feedback, which then leads to self-efficacy. And variability is very important. It's a source of adaptation. It's not a problem. So we come to embrace diversity, inclusion. It's not a one-for-all approach, but we acknowledge different trajectories. And there is also the idea of non-linear development. So we don't always have to go in the same way from A to Z. We can just, how to say, switch around in function of learning. Creating rich environments where learning can self-organize is very different from when, for example, the teacher stands outside the system and directs whatever is going on between the student and the learner. So here, learners can become flexible and adaptive. And all these elements we know are actually conditions to create this empowerment. So then finally, let's go to positive psychology. I'm looking at my time. How are we? I have time. Great. Yes. So positive psychology and the building blocks of well-being as proposed by Seligman. So unlike traditional psychology that focuses more on the causes and symptoms of mental illnesses and emotional disturbances, positive psychology, or the science of happiness, emphasizes traits to patterns, behaviors, and experience that are forward-looking and can help improve the quality of a person's day-to-day life. And Seligman introduced the PERMA model of well-being, arguing that flourishing or well-being emerges from the combination of positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. Positive emotion is the hedonic side of happiness, defined as the presence of positive affect and the absence of negative affect. Engagement is linked to the idea of flow experience, a mental state of focused concentration, of being fully immersed in an activity with feelings of enjoyment and involvement. Relationships encompass building of positive social relations with others, feeling socially integrated, cared about, and supported by others, and leading to a sense of belonging. And then evidently there is achievement, and I see that in my notes I miss a few things, but that's okay. So we have meaning, the M of meaning. Meaning is this feeling of having a purpose in life, and very often it's connected to the more long-term aspect of well-being. Personally, I also connect it to a more short-term aspect, and that means that we, in our activities, we find meaning. And that's why, for me, this whole idea of musical sense-making in connection to enactment process and the basic mechanisms is also so important for this element of well-being. The repeated experience of having the ability to give meaning to your activity is very important. And then there is achievement, the feeling of accomplishing something, the feeling of agency. I already talked about that. So all together, they make up well-being. Yes, and so working on that is something that, for me personally, is really important. For example, in the bachelor here, students, whenever they have to prepare and simulate lessons, the PERMA building blocks of well-being have to be in their lesson preparations. I think that connecting positive psychology and the PERMA model of well-being to empowerment is quite evident. But so just to wrap up a little bit, this different theoretical framework all gives us arguments to work like that, and they give us an idea on how they can lead, if we take them into account in our teaching, how they can actually lead to empowerment. But that was a lot of theory. Are you all still with me? I can see you because I have my presentation on, but I hope you are still awake after all that theory. Now I would like to go from theory to practice and exemplify all this with an approach to instrumental music education that I see personally as a possibility to complement existing approaches. Is it working? Okay. So based on the general framework of embodied music pedagogy and on my work on the musician-instrument relationship, I develop a theory and research-based approach to instrumental music teaching, in which I reconsider the role of the body and movement in learning how to play an instrument. I try to develop an education of the body that goes beyond the mere instrumentalist approach to body and musical instrument. And I call this approach a kinemusical approach. Okay, now imagine that from the very first notes one learns to play an instrument, students move or even dance while playing. And so this work focuses on formal instrumental music education, but I increasingly adopt it in domains of social action and music making. And for example, in the European project, it's a bit ago, but in the Resilience and Resonance project, we worked with vulnerable children in Poland, Cyprus, and Belgium using this kinemusical approach. Here you can see the premises of the approach when I started working on it. I wanted to start from some ideas, not dogmas. They are flexible. It's working principles that guide my work on the kinemusical approach. So the first one is developing the inner musician. And to do that, I work in different spaces that actually invoke or provoke a process of internalization. So first we might do things in large space with locomotor activities. Then we go to the personal space, that's just a space that surrounds you and that you can reach when you move, for example, your arms. And then we go to the internal space. Because it's something very important is when using movement, it's not the idea that musicians turn into dancers, evidently, yes. But I refer often to this commercial of vodka, where they hold a bottle of vodka in front of a cat and you see a panther. Well, in the same way, when I see a musician and I hold a bottle in front of vodka in front of the musician, I would like to see a dancer. It often makes me think also about Sokolov. When you listen to the pianist Sokolov, he's sitting there like very static, you would say, but his music is incredibly moving. And I don't just mean emotionally moving, but you feel how his music actually moves. So I'm sure if you hold a bottle of vodka in front of Sokolov, even while sitting very static, you see a dancer inside. A second working principle or premise is that I always want to involve the instrument. So it's not like, for example, in Dalcroze, where we most of the time do activities with movement without the instrument. So in the kinemusical approach, we use our instrument while moving. And just to say that these principles are not dogmas, throughout my research, I've learned that I have to combine more activities without and with the instrument. But the goal is always to involve the instrument. It's also, and that's the third premise, I want to work bottom up. That actually means that students can explore with this movement, the connection between music and movement. It's not about making choreographies or the teacher makes the choreographies and then have the students doing them. No, they invent their own music and movement connection. And of course, they can make their choreographies, but it's always them who do it. A fourth principle is from simple to complex. Although I don't want to work in a linear way, I am inspired by Bronfenbrenner also in design is proximal processes. It is very important to have the students grow in a way that fits their own individual constraints. And so sometimes when you go too complex from the very beginning because you want to work in a non-linear way, it can actually hinder their learning. So in our mind, it's very important to have this idea of going from simple activities that can become more and more complex. Hence the idea of Bronfenbrenner's proximal processes. And then finally, there is a fifth premise, and that is exercising the performing body. Remember the facts about the musicians, and so many musicians having physical problems, very often leading also to mental problems. I think it's really important that we exercise the performing body. That means, for example, as you see in the picture here, that we might work on freeing the joints while playing. So as said, I translate the theory into practice, and I do that by designing a framework of design prompts. There are some guiding principles for the design of the activities to help me observe and reflect on what I do. They also help me to be flexible when I need to make changes on the spot while teaching. And finally, they support me in imagining new activities and make my teaching creative. I want to emphasize that this framework of design prompts helps me to diversify the learning process as much as possible, creating different sets of individual task and environmental constraints to allow self-organized and emergent learning. And when I design these activities, I balance the different design prompts in view of creating activities that appeal to the specific learning goals as well as to the building blocks of well-being. So here we go. With some of these design prompts. So in the instrumental music lessons I organize, it's not just about performing. There is a lot of improvisation and there is also composition. And I think it's very important to combine these the different ways of making music, because there are all different perspectives on meaning in music. So again, remember the idea of musical sense making, but also of achievement. Here you see some of the didactic strategies I implement. They, for example, allow changing the task constraints, which may have an effect, for example, on engagement or on achievement. I can also diversify the learner's role in learning, which may affect positive relationships. To promote a process of interiorization, as said before, I use movement in different spaces, making sure that students experience the same content through locomotor and non-locomotor activities. And remember, it's all about patterns. Yes. So when we go to the enactment process, so when you have patterns in different spaces, but the patterns refer to the same content, this can induce this process of interiorization because you recognize it in the different perspectives or spatial perspectives. Engagement is really important here because when working in a larger space with different musicians and the way you connect to each other, we'll come to that also, you can really be into the activity in a much more intense way. But also at the same time, you work on meaning. And remember that I said that for me, meaning is not about the long term, or only about the long term aspect, but also about the short term aspect. Okay. I use spatial choreography. It's a very powerful way to manipulate the constraints, and the way learners position in space, engage in joint music making, is likely to have an impact on how they experience the music. Again, then this is very valuable for meaning making. You should try it out when you just move free, or when you face each other, when you stand in a circle or in a row doing the same thing. It's a very different experience. I use also social choreographies. It's very much related to the spatial choreographies, but you can work individually. So when, as a student, you really do the thing on your own. It can be one-on-one, where students form pairs, perform a task based on a particular strategy, for example, following the other or take turns. You can do it in small groups, and that's really different from when you do it in a larger group. And again, this is all to manipulate the different possibilities in the learning environment, leading to different affordances, different aspects that invite you to engage with each other and with the music. Using different types of social interaction is another way to manipulate how students engage with each other. And in this way, I can emphasize individual sense-making versus participatory sense-making. I think that participatory sense-making is really the most important element, but it doesn't mean we should neglect the individual experience of finding, meaning in music and then later on bringing it to the group. And then finally, I work on different relationship between the music and the movement. It can be very exploratory. You experiment with movements and with the music. You just try out different things. It can sometimes be complementary. That means for example, you might add a stepping pattern to feel the meter, or you might facilitate an aspect of playing, for example, a phrase. To feel a phrase and the timing of a phrase. You might, for example, move first in the larger space, but then only in personal space, just, for example, by doing movements lateral like this. You can, of course, align aspects. So that means in your movement is happening something that connects to a specific element in the music, but it can also be preparatory. Remember that I say that we have to take care of our body and exercise the performing body. So sometimes you do movements that prepare a particular musical task. It can also be very independent, although that is not such an easy thing to find. So in the end, what I do is making profiles of different activities. And when I look at the profile, I can just manipulate one element in the profile, whether it be the social choreography or the spatial choreography. And in that way, I can actually build and go from simple to more complex. For example, the spatial choreography might change in bringing in new movement patterns that might become more complex. Okay, these are the design prompts. We have the theories, and you go to the design prompts. It can all be still very, it's getting closer to practice, but let me give you an example of practice. And then I think we're almost there, Sabine. Is it? Yeah. Okay. So one of the activities I like doing is the meet and greet activity. And in the first part, learners freely walk around without their instruments in the classroom. And when passing somebody, they shake hands to say hello, but not using words. So just to greet each other. And the way of shaking hands is changed on cue, switching between different shape qualifications that's based on Laban, namely shape flow, which is self-directed, directional shape, spoke-like and arc-like movements that bridge from self to the environment like a professional handshake, and then shaping, which is more a rich, mutual, and sophisticated interaction, supporting by full-bodied interaction. So it's very expressive and somewhat exaggerated handshake, as if meeting somebody you like a lot and didn't see for a long time. Sabine, should we bring in something, more interactive, just to show it? Just come a bit closer, and I hope everybody sees us, so I can just show it, because, words is just words. Do you see us both? Can somebody say yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
First handshake is just like this. And I go for it. Second handshake is like, third handshake is like, very expressive, something like that. It's a bit artificial, but anyhow, you can see it. But in the second part of this activity, students use their instrument. They do exactly the same, but when they meet each other, they greet through music. They improvise a musical motif on their instrument to say hello in accordance with the different shape levels. So I manipulate in this activity the constraints. When you look at the individual constraint, I argue that I manipulate the level of arousal. And you should just try it in your classroom, and you will see what happens, how there is a building up of the level of arousal. It creates a very safe environment, actually, where students try out, they feel good, they laugh a lot, they have fun, but at the same time, they are being expressive. They are trying out things on their instrument, something you can later on then work with. There are the different ways of greeting, so that's the task constraints. And there is the idea of using the environment in different ways, because you walk around, you explore the space, I'm sorry, but you also have this one-on-one relationship when you meet each other. So relating this to the PERMA model, there is a lot of expressiveness in this music and movement connection, and you can clearly see when I do it that it elicits a lot of positive emotion. There is a balance between skill and challenge, because students can actually just play what they feel they can play. And sometimes you see students grow in these activities, where in the beginning they're, a little bit more cautious perhaps, or just trying out, a bit modest. But when you build up this level of arousal, you see that they actually bring in more of their abilities. And so just to remember, this balance between skill and challenge is important for inducing a flow experience, which Seligman often connected to engagement. The changing diets, you meet all the time different people. In this way, you work on relationship. You say hello. It's a positive relationship that you actually build with each other. And of course, these positive emotions that go along with it, they help shaping this positive relationship. It's very reciprocal, because you say hello to each other. It's very effective. And actually here I have to say that's part of the manipulating, that you go from a more disinterested to a very interested way of greeting each other, which actually also brings in this affective dimension in a growing way. Meaning goes to the creative connection of music and movement, and then achievement, again, as I said, this between the skills, the balance between skills and challenge. You feel really that you can do it, that you are able, and that you achieve something. For example, when you do something to another student, you greet in a certain way and you get something back, it also gives you the feeling of like, oh, it's working, great, I achieved something. A second activity is what I call step and play, where students start stepping together using a specific pattern, yes, often used in folk dance, namely the sideward close step. And they are instructed, but given some time to find each other's tempo and synchronize. This is a fantastic activity to work on entrainment, actually, when they are playing together. And when they do, the teacher or peer gives a cue, and part of the students determined beforehand or by a sign of the teacher, they start playing a whole note. At the next cue, a next group starts playing 2 half notes, then another cue and 4 quarter notes, and then somebody can improvise on top of that. So what I'm doing here in manipulating the constraints is I try to work or manipulate the idea of entrainment here, so bringing them together, leading it to synchronization. There are in the task, there are the different stepping patterns, and they play, of course, different musical elements. And environmental here, I bring them together. I can do it in different ways, as you can see in the little picture, and use different spatial and social choreographies. How does it relate to the PERMA model? Here again, the expressiveness, the music-movement connection in a very different way from the previous exercise, but they can actually put, and you can see it in the picture when you work with different ways of stepping, because you can step in a very robot way, or you can do it very expressive. The sensory motor coupling, yes, between the playing, what you are playing, and how you are stepping is something that really creates, this connection. When it works well, it goes to agency. You have the feeling you're able to it. You go really into the activity. Moving together, we go from I agency to we agency. The basic mechanisms are very much at play here. We have prediction, we have entrainment and alignment, and then you find the beat. This is really interesting when you see when they find it, also in the way they play while they are stepping. They really feel like, hey, it's working. I achieve a good result. So this is, of course, a very, short and brief explanation. I invite you to try out those things, and then you will see how the theory connects to the real life practice. And I think I'm there. Here are some publications. I can share probably the presentation, so no need to read. And I thank you for being here and listening to this talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luc. I think that was a very inspiring presentation for me. I know your work. I had the privilege to be there for 3 weeks with you, and we discussed a lot about all these approaches of embodiment. And for me, it is really deeply linked to what we are doing in the SIG Prime group. We really look for which are the mechanisms in our body which can help us to be developed, to integrate, and to be involved in our lives, in music, through music, during music lessons, but also in the whole school environment. And thank you for having underlined that aspect too. And now we really want to have an interactive part, and we encourage you to just raise your hand and then ask your question, or if you want to talk, you have also the possibility to put your questions into the chat, and I will give the questions to Luc so that we now can discuss with him. So Karina, you have a question, please.
Thank you so much. We are delighted to have your presentation to start with our SIG Prime online cafes. Thank you so much. There was a lot of important information and understanding, also connecting the theory to the practice, which I find really important in music education, because without the practical connection, why do we create new understanding of ideas and dimensions of music? I was wondering, you were emphasizing a lot the instrumental learning part. I also feel that that's important, and the bodily connection to playing instruments is important. Depending on the instrument, it may be a little bit different. For example, if I'm a pianist and a singer, so you cannot move around so much with the piano, but then you can move around a lot with some other instruments and while singing. And then I come to this question of the meaning of your own voice. We know, for example, of the polyvagal theory and the brain research and many other research evidence for the meanings and the significance of our voice connecting within the internal aspects of the experience of music in another way than also the instrumental activity does. But so I have been lately wondering a lot about the ability to create a balance between the instrumental learning and the vocal learning and expression with, for example, teacher-students. And we know about so much about the very early pre- and postnatal interaction happenings and our multiple sensory experiences connecting with our own voices. So how do you find the meaning of our own voice? And of course, the instrument, it's like a doll, a safe way to express. So your own voice reveals so much about you, but it's also the reason why the voice is so heavy in the perspective of meaning. But how do you find this? Sorry, it was complicated.
Okay. I try to keep everything in my head. First of all, perhaps I want to say that yes, I focus a lot in my work on instrumental education, because that's you have to. I think you have to focus on something, otherwise. And I don't want to, how to say, be someone who says I know something about everything. I like to go very deep. The second thing I want to say is that for me, the instrument is something like the voice. It is not something different. This is very important. I always think about Ernst Kapp, and Kapp talked about technology as a organ projection. And so for me, instruments are just that. They are actually something that we pull out of our capacities without technology and bring into technology. You can make your instrument sing in a way. So that being said, yes, I truly believe that using the voice, and we should do that way more in instrumental music education, but I do believe in an integrated way. That means it should not be decoupled from the playing. This is for me something very important, that you make the connection between when you sing, how do you connect that to playing the instrument? And not like, okay, we'll first sing the song and then we'll play it on the instrument. Now, how does it connect? So everything I've been saying here, you can actually integrate singing into it as a kind of a preparation to the playing. Could be perfectly possible. You could also do these kind of activities without an instrument and just singing. Yes, and the same for me. The same applies when you create through those activities a kind of a safe space in which, and yes, the voice is something, I see it. Let me give you an example. When you ask people to sing, it's often not so evident. Okay. When I used the music paint machine, and we tried it out yesterday, the music paint machine is a technology that allows you to make a picture, a painting, while actually playing an instrument or singing. Yes, and so whatever you do with your voice is translated in something visual. My God, have I seen kids sing while they were not having the idea that they were singing, but they were doing a lot of stuff with their voice that if I would have asked, please sing, they would never do. So it's really about what kind of an environment you create in which you would use the voice. I don't know if that's an answer, but that's for now the way my thinking would go into, let's say.
Thank you very much, Karina, for your question. We have another one from Elizabeth. She thanks for your inspiring presentation and asks, could you elaborate on the inclusivity and embodied pedagogy, please?
Good questions. Well, what I would say is that in some way, when you work in the way as I have presented, you move away from some aspects that perhaps, and I'm very careful, as you can see, that perhaps in traditional music education are very important. Let's think about the repertoire, the role of the teacher, and so on. It brings in a certain way of working, and I mean, we can see it in the music school system that actually, well, it's perhaps not so always so inclusive. What the embodied music pedagogy does, I think, is it brings really the core of what you do, not to repertoire, but to working on this individual possibility to express yourself through music, through movement, doing this with each other. This is not always evident. To give you a very concrete example, I work with children with a migrant background in Belgium, and I have my idea about the kinesiological approach. So we do that, we do the shake hands activity, but suddenly somebody says, sorry, I'm not shaking hands of a girl. Yes, so this is some things that can actually happen. So it's not that this is a wonder thing, but I do believe that working through music and movement, going away from always the fixed repertoire, going really to expressing yourself, can actually cross boundaries that perhaps otherwise are still there. That would be my short answer.
Thank you, Luc. We have a question from Maria. How does the Dalcroze rhythmic approach align and extend the principle of the embodied pedagogical model, particularly the use of movement, kinesthetic awareness, and bodily experience as a foundation for musical learning?
Great question. I love the Dalcroze approach. I've been very active in the Dalcroze community. We had our conference in July here in Luxembourg, the ICDS conference. So I'm a big fan. How is it related to what I'm doing? I would say very much, because I'm inspired a lot by the Dalcroze approach. However, what in my work has been a driving element is the relationship between musician and instrument. And I think that it's often too easily thought that doing movement and music without the instrument, yes, makes it just happen then on the instrument. I think this idea of almost transfer. Actually, you do first things Dalcroze without the instrument, and then you play on your instrument, and then it's great. Everything is in there. Well, first, I haven't seen research that shows that, but I think because of all the thinking and work I did on the musician-instrument relationship, I think that idea of just transferring it is seeing the instrument as a kind of a tube through which you just bring your musical meaning. It doesn't make the instrument part of the musical meaning necessarily. And this is, for me, is very important that you see, and again, it's dynamical system thinking. The instrument is part of the meaning making. And this is so important. So why would we decouple the meaning making through the instrument from the meaning making through the movement? That's the very idea of why I combine music playing and movement. But of course, as I said, that my principles are not dogmatic, and I learned that I have to do activities also without the instrument. Yes, so there, Dalcroze is fantastic. Yes, it's just amazing. But I would always, and I'm just to say, I'm not a Dalcrozian. I'm not a trained, certified, licensed Dalcroze person. I'm just inspired by it. Same for Laban. So it's important to use what is going on in the Dalcroze. So it's more, they are complementary. I don't think one of the two approaches would be extending or expanding or improving or whatever. It's just two perspectives.
Thank you, Blaženka, who is very engaged also in research on improvisation and well-being. Then she asked, she said, you are glad to hear that you conceived the PERMA model. I would like to use the painting machine. Could you provide more information about how to use?
I know, Luc, that you are very busy and that you don't have enough time. Thank you. So this is an opportunity to ask you if you will have time to provide me with more instruction. How could I use it in my research, please?
Let's think about, but perhaps what I can say is that it's possible. But perhaps I can say, for the people who don't know the music paint machine, this is a system that allows you to make a digital painting by playing music and moving at the same time. So you see the connection with the kinemusical approach. And what perhaps I want to say is that if the kinemusical approach came about, it is a lot thanks to the music paint machine. I often say what the screen was in the music paint machine became the floor in the kinemusical approach. So it's very much connected. Of course, it develops, and you bring in new elements and so on. But the music paint machine has been very important influence for my work on kinemusical approach. And I hope one day that I will integrate both of them again. Like, for example, a lot of activities could be connected to visuals. and we are actually at now working towards augmented reality and the use of that. And so while we do it now on rhythm skill acquisition with Bahare Bezadaval, one of my PhD students, is doing great work on that. Using visuals through AR. So when you use glasses, AR glasses, you can still see each other. We would not be able to do that with VR glasses. We would bump into each other and end up in the hospital. This is one element. Another element that's perhaps not so much related to the visuals is actually still the idea of augmenting, but not necessarily with visuals. I notice in my classroom, for example, synchronization. Kids 4, 5, 6 years old. They walk together and they will synchronize. Not always, huh? Yeah, until I put bells on their feet. Very interesting when I do the kinesical activities to just have bells on their feet and then augment in such a way the stepping. Well, I would like to go to more technological approaches there and integrate sensors on that you can put on the feet, on the arms, and that can actually create a lot of new possibilities and invitations to actually move in certain ways, because while you improvise on your instrument, your movements might also make music. Wow. I mean, I love the idea and I hope to get there.
Thank you. And as I'm focused on early childhood education, so the basic reaction of every child on music is movement. Its first reaction. So working in that project and in research, and what is the most important thing, as you mentioned, I totally agree with you that practice-based research and connection with theory and praxis is for me really the most important, because we build new theory based on the research from praxis, and it's really great. So that movement starts in the kindergarten, from little babies to until and later, of course. Thank you.
Perhaps I can just very briefly say something. Very often we think practice works on the theory. As in everything I do, I work a lot from theory to practice.
Yes,
there is this nice quote, there is nothing, nothing as practical as a good theory.
Yes.
And so this is something I really like to work with. The students in our bachelor have to do that too. They learn about the theory and they have to constantly apply the theory and try it out in practice and see what they can do with it. And of course, then you need to feedback.
Yes.
This is for sure. But the idea of going from theory to practice and trying out in practice these concepts. I mean, we have been working for 3 weeks with Sabine. I do it a lot with Melissa. What a challenge to bring a theory into practice. Same with the constraints-led approach. It's from physical education. It's not so evident to bring it into practice. But the very idea of trying to do that makes you evolve as a teacher I think in a very beautiful way.
Thank you. I like it, and I think it's the most important. That's the interaction. Thank you. Thank you.
Is there another question? I don't see any in the chat. And so, Sandra, in which way may the group of children affect a kinematical approach? Is it possible to apply it in an individual lesson?
Hi, Sandra. This is a very good question. Thanks for it. You challenge me. What I experience personally, yes, is that doing this in a one-on-one setting, it feels a little bit awkward. I've tried it, yes, but it does feel a little bit awkward. That's why I always teach with this approach in group. Because for me, it's really about the kids interacting, and I am there in the interaction as part of it, and I can steer it somehow, but I like to have many things happen. But when you do this just one-on-one, it's a totally different. So perhaps somebody else could say, look, I'm going to do that. I'm going to focus on it. I'm going to try to bring that into the one-on-one. But my feeling, how would say, my heart as a teacher does not allow me to do that somehow. Perhaps it's not a very scientific way of thinking, perhaps, but I mean, enough work to do in group, so I can stay there. But yeah, and the first, perhaps you could, in which way may the group of children affect the kinesiological approach? Well, I think it always does, because the kids bring in so much, because all the time they can bring material into the class. It's not me saying like this has to happen or this. They can come up with their own elements, and so then it's my job to, as a teacher, to. That's why I said, like, that's why I have all these prompts. They help me on the spot to see clearly and think, okay, did they bring this in? How can I help? How can I support? How can I arrange something in the environment? How can I perhaps change a little bit the task? But always starting from their input. So I would say that this is the heart of the kinesiological approach, that kids always affect what's happening. Or for that matter, adults. It doesn't change. I hope this answers your question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luc. I have also a short question. You told us there's no focus on the repertoire like we does it classically, but is it more about an action repertoire we have to develop with children, and the theory of embodiment can help us to develop an action repertoire that we can, through the core principles, better understand as teachers?
So you say action repertoire?
Yeah, the repertoire of actions that kids can do, alignment, entrainment, perception, are for me musical actions they have to do.
Well, they do that, but those are not the goal, of course. They are just the environment in which it is happening. And when I'm saying it's not repertoire based, I mean it's not like we go from this piece of music, then to that, then to that, then to that, just to increase the skills. But of course, especially I work to, perhaps it's important to say that I use this mostly in early childhood settings. Although I've worked with orchestras and bands and adults, but mostly I work with in early childhood. And of course, we do all the time songs. But the song, it's never rote learning. Before a song gets in, they have worked with all the building blocks of the song, and so the song comes in and it's something evident. It's just yeah, they recognize almost the song without ever doing the song. But all the building blocks are there, and then the song is also, when the song gets in, immediately it's transposed. This is also one of the elements. You never play it in only one tonality. Because this flexibility idea is very important. Also, everything is played by heart. Yeah.
Cool, thanks. There's another question from Karina.
Thank you. There's so much that I would like to discuss with you, but now just one question. And before raising the question, I would like to highlight that I have shared a link and a QR code to join our SIG Prime group. Please feel free and welcome to join our group. But my question is about the problem that we are facing today. We have so much important, significant information of the impacts of music for well-being, for life, for the understanding of human values and many kinds of positive learning results and such. There's a variety. But then we are facing the challenge of music courses being squeezed in only a few credits. And so there will be a problem also the understanding of the basic starting level of the students in teacher education. I work in teacher education, so I highlight it. You use the theory to implement in practice. But how do you find the difference between the inner understanding of the musical phenomenon when the starting level of the student is quite low, so starting from zero actually to learn music, to be able to teach music later, and then the inner thinking of the musical phenomenon by the researcher teacher who wants to squeeze the music in a very tight package, so to say. I don't know if you access my question, but how to connect these?
Okay. I would like to see them in writing. I will try. So, but mainly you're talking about how to go to a certain level, that you have the level when you want to become a teacher, that your level is significantly high to be able to become a teacher. Is that correct?
Yeah, with very low credits. We have sometimes
Yeah, with very low credits. Huh? Yeah.
The music education for generalist teachers.
Yes, that's what you mean. Did I translate?
Mhm.
Okay. This it's to be honest, it's a question we also face in our bachelor. We have quite some discussions about this. First, I have to say I am very lucky to be in Luxembourg. Because in Luxembourg, education is free for all until the age of 18, music education. They created a bachelor, they created my professorship because they really value music and music education. So I think they don't decrease it, but they increase it. So this is really fantastic. But that doesn't mean that there are not challenges. And one of those challenges is indeed the level. What do you do? So, for example, for instrumental teachers, what would be the level on their instrument, for example? Where do you get in? Here in Luxembourg, there is a clear level that is needed. It's what they call here the premier prix. Yes, but I think that perhaps is not always the best way of looking at it. I think here the keyword is diversity, and where will our teachers go to? Yes, and so a lot depends on the context where you go to as a teacher. And of course, perhaps you cannot know in the beginning, but at least a training can be very clear about this. Yes, I'm working on this in Luxembourg to say where can you go or not, and that depends also on the field. Because, for example, if we would say we deliver a bachelor, and in that bachelor is clearly stated where you would be able to go or not, but there are not enough teachers, and then they decide to take you anyway as a teacher, then, I mean, there is no use to all these kind of things. But so the level is very much related, I think, to the context where you're going. So, for example, you can have great teachers that perhaps are not able to play the difficult pieces on their instrument, but they still can do it. Or that perhaps are not the best singers, yes, but have wonderful abilities to work with children. And then I would say, like, but there are so many means we can use. Yeah, I work with students here in Luxembourg who are not in the Bachelor in Music Education, but in general education. And I explain them, look, even if you can't read notes, you can still use Finale or MuseScore and use that, bring it, export as MIDI, use the MIDI in a digital audio workstation, and do great stuff with it. So I think level is sometimes a dangerous idea. I'm not saying always, sometimes a danger that fits to a certain way of thinking. And I think that certain way of thinking is something we should reflect on and think about. It's like the highest level is the soloist, you know, the conductor, and then you have the ones playing in the orchestra, you know, and somewhere at the bottom are the teachers, and you know, and so on. So it's very much related to that discourse, I think. So I don't know if, again, in this short time, it's difficult to come with a clear answer. I have to think about things too, but that would be the direction in which I go. Are we acknowledging existing discourses and reinforcing them, or are we trying to work with them and make them evolve? That is for me the important question in that.
Thank you. I think it's a lot about the embodied idea of musical learning and the understanding of music as interaction coming from the very early developmental phases. And also I think that all students, despite of their direction of or goal of learning or content of the need to teach, I think everybody would learn a lot of how children interact and how much music it includes. And that's important. And it also connects directly with the embodied activities.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, agree.
Thanks. And in that line, we have a last question from Georgia. Do you think that there should be a reformation of the music education program and advocacy on including movement practice in the education? Because dance education includes a lot of music and music analysis courses across institutions. So I don't know if, Georgia, you have to explain a bit more.
I think I get the question, Georgia. Yes, would be my answer. Absolutely. I think that the use of movement in connection to music should be a fundament of every training. It should be the fundament. Now, I have to say that sometimes this happens, but it's connected to one approach. Yes, and this is something I do not. I'm not in favor of. I think that students who are being trained as future teachers should have different approaches to music, so they can have different perspectives. For me, this is really, really important. It's not just one. So, for example, if I would, and I'm trying to change the bachelor in Luxembourg based on that very idea, yes. But if I could say like, okay, Dalcroze is now a main course in the training. I would never do that. It would never be the only movement approach. So yeah, I would also bring in, for example, Laban, but I would also bring in the kinesiological approach and so many. Why not Gaga even? Yes, or viewpoints. All such interesting approaches with always just a little bit different angle. And these different angles, I think, is what we need, because to go back to a word that we started with, because it empowers us as teachers. And when we empower the teachers to empower the students, I think then we're on the good way.
Thank you, Luc. Yeah,
Please,
I just,
Georgia.
I just say that it was also a question and also an answer to Antonia's
Okay.
question before, because I totally understand that it's hard to use this practice if you're not trained in movement practice, and I totally agree with you that of course there shouldn't be one practice reinforced in any program, and an ideal situation would be to have different seminars with different approaches, so students could have a lot of input from different approaches, and then follow something perhaps that they are more interested into. Thanks.
Yeah. Very good point, Georgia. Yes, I think in Luxembourg, where we're working to is that each semester, so that's 15 lessons. I know it's not a training, but it's at least something. But that we have 5 semesters. The sixth semester is mobility. But okay, so 5 here in Luxembourg. That we will have 5 different approaches that will be implemented. That's the idea. But I get you. Training is very important in an approach. Yes.
Training, and I would say also deeper understanding of the roots, the theoretical roots, what we are doing, and all this active pedagogy. And that's why I really want to thank you, Luc, for this deep insight, what was always very inspiring for me. And I hope for all the community who was present today. And I would thank you very much for being here, for all your questions, and for your active listening. You will see that we are this SIG Prime group. If you want to join us, feel free. You can contact us, as Karina said. And I don't know if our chair from the online cafe will close the chat session. From my part, I would like thank you, Karina, Luc, and the staff from ISME who supported us from India. Thank you very much. And so I would say goodbye for my part. I don't know if there's anything to add, Luc.
Thank you all for being here and joining us in this.
Thank you.
Thank you also. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sabine.
Thank you on behalf of ISME and yes, the advocacy committee representative had to leave early, so he just said to say thank you for attending. A quick note that when you leave the session, you will get a link, a survey link for the next online cafe. Like you can give suggestions because we build these sessions from your feedback. So if there's anything that you want to hear from us about, if there's any specific topic that you're interested in, you can put it in the link and then we will arrange that session for you. So yeah, please do fill the link when you exit the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Carlos.
Bye, Carlos.
Thank you, Professor Luc.
With pleasure. Bye-bye, Blaženka.
Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Just gonna leave or we have